Chapter 4581. Hearing her words, Wanyan Qianhua thought of the pile of ashes at the peak of the mountain and couldn't say anything for a while. She suppressed her emotions and said, "Don't worry, get well first. We didn't see Moze when we came, but Guan Shilin has already gone to Moze's place to investigate. There will be news soon," Wanyan Qianhua said. Seeing that she was feeling better, he couldn't help but ask, "What's going on? Weren't you looking for the child? Why did this happen all of a sudden?" Feng Jiu lay down and murmured, "We originally said that we were going to look for the child, but in the end, he suddenly couldn't suppress the spiritual aura in his body and wanted to advance. That mortal realm couldn't withstand his advancement, so we hurriedly came here. But we didn't expect that the heavenly lightning would be so powerful. Actually, it wasn't just the sound of the heavenly lightning that was echoing in the sky. There was also some movement on our side." Jun Jueshang stood aside with his hands behind his back, looking at Fengzhou on the bed with doubts in his eyes. He asked, "But why did the heavenly lightning last for so many days? How could it be so powerful?" "I don't know. When the heavenly lightning first appeared, there was nothing unusual. But gradually, it became different. Even Tian Jizi, who never left the heavenly mountain, came." Fengzhou murmured, thinking of Tian Jizi and that scene. For a moment, her throat was choked. This tribulation is called the heavenly tribulation. The heavenly lightning will last for 81 days. Once it starts, it can't be stopped. It's either life or death. Her voice was hoarse as she said each word clearly. However, the Moze heavenly lightning tribulation only lasted for 49 days. The 49th bolt of heavenly lightning seemed to have gathered the power and strength of all the previous bolts of heavenly lightning. When that bolt of heavenly lightning appeared, I knew it was bad. She paused for a moment, and after a long while, she said bitterly, "I wanted to help him block that heavenly lightning, but I was bound by Tian Jizi's ancient technique and couldn't move half a step." When the 49th heavenly lightning struck Tian Jizi, he rushed out. Hearing this, they fell silent and felt heavy. Even if they didn't see it with their own eyes, they knew that it must have been extremely dangerous. "Tian Jizi is Mo Chen's master, right? He died just like that?" Wanyan Qianhua couldn't help asking, "Didn't he jump out of the three realms long ago? How could he die just like that?" Feng Jiu closed her eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "I wonder if that pile of ashes belongs to Mo's. Or Tian Jizi's. Or perhaps it belongs to both of them." Tian Jizi's words suddenly echoed in her mind. She was slightly startled. She suddenly opened her eyes and murmured, "A slim chance of survival. A slim chance of survival." Wanyan Qianhua glanced at Zhen Zhusheng, then asked Fengzhou, "What slim chance of survival? Do you mean that Moze has a slim chance of survival? Help me up," Fengzhou said, looking at Ling Shuang. Seeing this, Ling Shuang carefully helped her sit up. After letting her lean against the head of the bed, he quietly took a few steps back. He came to the table and poured a cup of water. At the same time, he said to Leng Hua, "Go to the kitchen and bring the warm porridge over. Let master eat some first." "Okay." Leng Hua replied, then left. Chapter 4582. "I'll do it," Wanyan Qianhua said. She took the water from Ling Shuang's hands and carefully fed it to Fengzhou. Then, she handed the empty cup to her. After a cup of water moistened her throat felt much better. Fengzhou leaned back and looked at Wanyan Qianhua. She asked, "Sister, do you think my brother went to the world controlled by Mo's?" "Yes. Because you were unconscious before, we didn't know how Mo's was. So, we let him go and take a look." Wanyan Qianhua held her hand and said, "Even if we didn't see him, even if we couldn't find him, you don't have to worry. He is the ruler of that world. As long as he is still alive, that world will definitely have his spiritual power. Tianjizi fought with his life to fight for a chance of survival. I think, maybe he is still alive. Fengjiu gradually calmed down at this time. She sorted out the matter and carefully analyzed it. With Xianyuan Mo's strength, if he passes this test, he will have an immortal body. Jun Jueshang said. He looked at Fengjiu and said, think of everything in a positive way. He shouldn't die so easily. As long as he is still alive, you don't have to worry. One day, he will definitely come back to find you and the child. Wanyan Qianhua comforted. The porridge is here. Master, drink some porridge first. Ling Shuang came in with the porridge. Ling Shuang, you guys take care of her. I will go to the kitchen and make some nourishing food for her. Her body was fine, but now it is weak because of her. Wanyan Qianhua said. He stood up and made room for them, letting Ling Shuang and Leng Hua take care of her. We will take good care of Master. The two of them replied. After watching the two of them leave the room, they went forward to feed their master the porridge. Outside, Junju Shang accompanied Wanyan Qianhua to the kitchen. On the way there, Wanyan Qianhua asked, you said that if I pass Mo's, I will have an immortal body. But he only went through 49 bolts of lightning. That shouldn't be considered too much, right? Jun Jueshang sighed and said, how can it be so easy to cultivate an immortal body? In these tens of thousands of years, almost no one had heard of an expert who had cultivated an immortal body. Looking at the world, how many people could reach the level of Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mo's? What's more, an immortal body. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua frowned and said, the two of them are already extraordinary. They have done things that many others can't do. They will definitely overcome this obstacle. But Wanyan Qianhua paused and looked at him and asked, with Xianyuan Mo's strength, if he really passes this obstacle and reconstructs his immortal body, will he also directly ascend to the 9 heavens? Junju Shang glanced at her and said, who in this world knows about that? In these tens of thousands of years, no one has succeeded in ascending. Who knows what kind of world it will be after ascending? He looked at the sky and walked slowly with his hands behind his back. He said slowly, in this world, the heavenly Tao is the most unpredictable. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua was silent and didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. On the other side of the heaven realm, and the others who came up from the mortal realm were transported by the transportation array and directly arrived at the transportation array at the back of the mountain of the sect. When they appeared at the transportation array, the figures of the few children swayed slightly. It was obvious that they couldn't stand still. 17 directly fell to the ground. The few people beside her just looked at her coldly. They didn't even reach out to help her. Chapter 4583. They felt that after these people arrived at the upper realm sect, their attitude towards them had suddenly changed. It was as if they were more confident than before. It made sense. Originally, this was a sect in the mortal world. Even if something really happened and they fought, they only had a few people who could fight. However, things were different in the upper realm sections. If a large sect was here, even if they were intimidated by the Silver Wolf's might and combat strength, they would still have more confidence than before. Sensing this, 17 saw that those people were walking in front, so she lowered her voice and said to Hao, young master, we're just going to follow them like this. Do we need to be on guard? We're already here. Let's go and take a look first. Hao said and looked at Mu Chen and Mu Yu. You two follow closely and don't run around, understand? Yes, big brother, don't worry. We know. The two little guys nodded, indicating that they would not cause trouble for him. As early as when they arrived at the upper realm sect and appeared in the transmission array, a disciple of the upper realm sect hurriedly went to report. And when they walked with a few children and a guard behind them, the disciples of the upper realm sect bowed to the few venerables in front of them and sized up the 3 children. "Look, those 3 children are really good looking. The 2 little ones look exactly the same. Their facial features are very exquisite. Looking at them, I can't help but want to kiss them," a female disciple said, her eyes shining as she looked at the 2 little dolls Mu Qin and Mu Yu. Mu Qin held his big brother's hand and walked expressionlessly with a taut little face. He did not even look at those people. He had the appearance of a little adult, but it just so happened that those female disciples' eyes lit up and they followed him closely. And Mu Yu was more fond of smiling. Her small appearance was mischievous and her pair of quick-witted eyes were suffused with a crafty light. Her delicate and likable little face showed an innocent and harmless smile to the people around her, causing those disciples to want to take a step forward. Seeing that those venerables in front of them were walking far ahead, Youth let go of her big brother's hand and asked a delicate and pretty woman beside her sweetly, "Beautiful big sister, what upper realm sect is this?" "This is upper realm sect." "Little sister, where did you come from? Why did you come back with us venerables?" When the woman heard her soft and sweet voice, she couldn't help but smile. "Upper realm sect. Beautiful big sister, what heaven realm is this?" You asked again. The woman was a little surprised that such a small child asked such a strange question, but she still said, "This is Dongxian continent of the heaven realm." After Hao and Mu Chen, Yu who was waiting for her, Hao held Yu and said, "Let's go. Beautiful big sister, goodbye." Yu sweetly smiled, and waved her hand while shouting. The few people in front turned around and glanced at them, but they didn't say anything. They just walked in front of them until they reached the main hall on the main peak. The sect leader, several elders, and the peak masters of the various peaks were already seated in the hall as soon as the disciple announced their arrival. "Sect master, the venerables have returned." A disciple came in and reported the middle-aged man in the main seat said in a low voice. The disciple nodded and ran out. Chapter 45-84. Everyone in the hall naturally looked at the 3 children with scrutinizing eyes. Even if it was them, when they saw the appearance and bearing of the 3 children, they couldn't help but secretly exclaim in admiration. At such a young age, they already had the appearance of dragons and phoenixes. It could be seen that their parents must be extremely outstanding people. Thinking that the contract beast of the older child was a sacred beast, everyone's heart was slightly moved. If a sacred beast belonged to their sect, it could become the guardian beast of the sect. Sect master. The few people who came in cupped their hands and respectfully bowed. Everyone has worked hard. Please take a seat. The sect master said and waved his hand to let them sit. Several people responded and sat down on the empty seats on the left and right sides. Then, like everyone else, they looked at the 3 children standing in the hall. "What are your names?" the sect master asked, looking at Hao and the other 2. Compound surname Xianyuan, single name, Hao. Hao said, looking at the middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table. Xianyuan Hao. That sect master slightly pondered, and heard a soft voice. "My name is Xianyuan Mu Yu, and this is my twin brother, Xianyuan Mu Qin." Yu said with a beaming smile on her small face. She appeared harmless and pure. The sect master nodded, looked at them, and asked, "I heard that you have a sacred beast." "Yes." Hao responded with an indifferent expression. "Where is it? Can you summon it out for us to see?" A middle-aged man sitting on the left side said. Hao looked at that person and didn't refuse. Instead, he directly called out the silver wolf. With a flash of light, the majestic silver wolf appeared in front of everyone. Hiss. It's really a sacred beast. Everyone who was originally sitting sucked in a mouthful of cold air, and the few people who were closer to the silver wolf involuntarily stood up and stepped back, pulling away from the silver wolf. Looking at that majestic silver wolf, everyone's expression slightly changed, but after looking at each other, they suppressed their thoughts. Which clan are you from? What are your parents' names? Do you need us to find them? The sect master asked, and his gaze fell on the three children. This time, the two little ones didn't say anything. They just looked at their big brother. Howard paused for a moment and said, "Thank you, sect leader. However, there's no need for that. We can go back by ourselves." Seeing that they didn't even mention their families or their parents' names, everyone's eyes flashed. One of them asked, "What are your parents' names?" As far as we know, there is no Xianyuan surname on this continent. Howard pursed his lips and didn't say anything. How about this? Take a rest first. We'll talk about the rest later. As the sect master spoke, he turned to a middle-aged man sitting below and said, "Left Peak Master, bring them to settle down." "All right." The middle-aged man stood up, glanced at the silver wolf, and said to the three children, "Come with me." Howard thought for a moment before leaving with his younger siblings. Behind them, Silver Wolf and 17 followed. Chapter 4585. These three children, no matter which one it is, are not ordinary. The sect leader stood up and walked slowly with his hands behind his back. He came to the middle of the hall and said, "That child called Xianyuan Hao is only about 10 years old, but he has already reached the peak of the Golden Elixir realm. Moreover, he is calm and steady, neither arrogant nor humble. His body naturally emits a noble aura. From this, it can be seen that this child has an extraordinary background and is extremely talented." He paused and turned to look at the crowd. He asked, "I wonder if you have noticed the pure spiritual aura on the two twins?" Everyone was stunned and fell silent for a moment. The sect leader seemed to have expected that they would not speak. He only glanced at them and continued, "The spiritual aura on their bodies is extremely pure. I have lived for hundreds of years, but this is the first time I have seen children with such pure spiritual aura. I guess that the spiritual aura on their bodies should be innate spiritual aura, or, they are innate spiritual bodies." Hiss. When everyone heard his words, they sucked in a breath of cold air. Some were surprised and some were shocked. Innate spiritual bodies. Is it the kind of innate spiritual bodies that are hard to come by in 100 years? It is said that cultivators with such bodies can cultivate at a rapid pace. They can be said to be demonic geniuses. At that moment, everyone's thoughts were slightly moved. One of them said, "Sect leader, these children must stay in the sect. Take them in as disciples of the sect. Such seedlings cannot be allowed to leave." Another person said. Hearing their words, an elder stroked his beard and pondered. He said, "Do you think that they will be willing to stay? Don't forget that they have a sacred beast with them. With that sacred beast's battle prowess, even if all of us join forces, we may not be able to tame it." When he said this, everyone immediately fell silent. Indeed, they had the ability to take down the three children. But that sacred beast, the old man who spoke earlier glanced at everyone and said, "Sect master, actually, I feel that they might not be from our world." "Not someone from our world? How is that possible?" Another person was surprised and even in disbelief. "If they are not from the mortal world, then they must be from our world. Otherwise, where can they be from? I also think that they are most likely not from the heaven-leaving realm." Another middle-aged man also said. He looked at the sect leader and said, "We interacted with them for a while in the mortal world below. When they came here and asked the disciples of the sect about our sect leader and the name of this heaven realm, we had our suspicions. It's just that we didn't dare to be sure. Hearing this, the sect leader pondered for a while and said, since that's the case, let's think of a way to probe them first. Before that, don't let them leave. Yes. Everyone responded and left one after another. On the other side, How and the rest followed that peak master to a courtyard. That peak master smiled and said, you all rest here first. If there's anything you need, just leave it to your disciples. After saying that, he didn't stay for long, leaving only 2 disciples to guard the courtyard entrance for them to order around. 17 naturally took over from the 2 disciples who were guarding the courtyard. At the same time, she sent them away to prepare some food for them. In the evening, the 2 high lords came together and saw the twins sitting at the stone table in the courtyard, looking up at the sky. There was no one else around, and the silver wolf was nowhere to be seen. The 2 high lords looked at each other and were about to go in when they heard a soft voice coming from outside. Big brother, when I grow up, I want to be a ghost doctor like Mother. I want to be the Lord of heaven and earth. I want to be very, very powerful. Chapter 45-87. The 2 of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock and awe. Even their breathing became lighter. It was as if they couldn't hear anything that was being said in the courtyard. Their minds were filled with the words that the little girl had said in her soft voice, which made them pale with fright. Their minds were ringing as they quietly retreated. Step by step, they retreated until they were more than 10 meters away. Only then did they gasp for breath. This is serious. We have to report this to the Lord immediately. That's right, let's go. The 2 of them walked slowly and hurriedly back to the Lord's place. Their hearts were filled with shock as they hurried back to the Lord's place. What they did not know was that after they left, the 2 little guys in the courtyard looked at each other and smiled slyly. The 2 peak lords rushed to the Lord's courtyard. When they arrived at the courtyard, they saw the Lord chatting with several elders while drinking tea. They immediately stepped forward. Lord, we have something important to report. Oh. What is it that has you 2 in such a hurry? The Lord looked at the 2 in surprise. We were just thinking of going over to the 3 children's place to find out what's going on. Who would have thought that before we even entered the courtyard, we would overhear the twins talking in the courtyard? One of them said anxiously. What could have caused such a huge change in your expressions? Could it be that they want to leave this place quietly? One of the elders asked. That's not it. The 2 peak lords shook their heads. One of them said, the little girl said to her brother that when she grows up, she wants to be a ghost doctor like her mother. She also wants to be the Lord of heaven and earth. What? Hearing this, the few people who were sitting immediately stood up in shock. The Lord's voice trembled. You say that again. The little girl said that when she grows up, she wants to be a ghost doctor like her mother. She also wants to be the Lord of heaven and earth. The peak lord said again, his face pale. The ghost doctor and the Lord of heaven and earth. No matter which one it was, they could not afford to offend them. Even though they were in the heaven-distant realm, they had heard of the ghost doctor's name. The Lord of heaven and earth was the ruler of the heaven realm. Even a 3-year-old child would know how powerful she was. What's more, the ghost doctor and the Lord of heaven and earth were the same person. You didn't hear wrongly. The ghost doctor Fingzhou could not possibly be here in the heaven-distant realm. Furthermore, those children did not even have a strong cultivator protecting them. An elder said, but his voice became softer and softer. That was because the 3 children did not have any powerful experts protecting them in secret, but they had a sacred beast. Previously, they had thought that their origins were mysterious and they did not know which family they were from. But at this moment, the words they heard and the sacred beast were enough to explain everything. Those 3 children don't have any strong warriors by their side, but they have sacred beasts. Another elder muttered. When he heard this news, he was also extremely shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. Chapter 45-88. Sect Head forced himself to remain calm, then he took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. After easing his state of mind due to shock, he repeatedly said, Fortunately, we didn't do anything. Don't know if he was comforting himself or others, but after hearing his words, the complexion of several elders also gradually eased up. That's right, they just had that thought, they still haven't done anything, nothing, the matter still hasn't gotten out of hand. At this time, those 2 peak masters looked at each other, then one of them hesitantly asked, Sect Head, do you think that the ghost doctor mentioned by that little girl is that legendary ghost Dr. Fingzhou? At this time, Sect Head also calmed down, and said in a deep voice, Other than that Fingzhou, who in this world dares to call themselves ghost doctor? Merely, if those 3 children are really the children of those 2, then how could they be stranded in the mortal world? Finally, they were also brought here to us. Sect Head, how about we go and ask them? If they are really the children of those 2, then with 3 little ancestors here, not only can we not touch them, we also have to protect them. Otherwise, if something happens, then I'm afraid our Sect Head, and even us, will not be able to escape from this calamity. Great Elder said. At this time, his heart was in a mess. He was somewhat flustered, somewhat shocked, and also somewhat excited. If they are really the children of those 2, then their sect will protect their safety, and perhaps, in the future, they will have the opportunity to meet that legendary ghost Dr. Fingzhou. This matter is of great importance, you all only know about it, but for the time being, don't leak it out. What is the matter? We will first go and ask them, then discuss it. Sect Head said in a deep voice, and his gaze swept past several people in the courtyard. Hearing this, several elders and those 2 peak masters immediately said, Rest assured Sect Head, we will certainly keep our mouths shut. Thereupon, several people hurriedly went to that small courtyard, intending to personally ask what was going on. In the small courtyard, 3 children were sitting in the middle of the courtyard, and 17 and 2 disciples who were carrying dinner placed the dishes and rice on the table, then 2 people retreated, while 17 stood at one side. Big brother, is this meat? You blinked her pair of curious big eyes, and looking at some minced meat inside the dish, she asked in surprise. Mu Chen looked at the dishes on the table and pursed his lips. He looked at 17 and asked, Are they eating here? I don't even see any meat. Also, why is there no soup? 17 glanced at the 2 disciples outside and said to them, The kitchen staff said that this is the standard meal for outer sect disciples. Inner sect disciples have already abstained from eating grains, while outer sect disciples normally eat like this. If you want additional dishes, you have to add more crystals. Hao frowned, took out a universe bag, and passed it to 17, saying, Take these away. Ask the kitchen to make it again. They should have spirit beast meat or something like that. Yes, they do. However, they said that it was for the sect master, peak master, and the other upper echelons. They don't allow their subordinates to touch it. 17 said. When she thought of the faces of those people in the kitchen, her face turned cold. He originally thought that since the young masters were still growing, he wanted them to prepare some good food for them to eat. But who would have thought that the kitchen staff would make all sorts of excuses and give them these few dishes and then let them go? Chapter 45-89. 17 was slightly startled, but she didn't ask anything. She just took a step back and stood to the side. The 2 little guys looked at their big brother. Seeing that he didn't say anything, they picked up their chopsticks and picked at the dishes on the table. Because they hadn't eaten much today, their stomachs were growling. Eat some fruits to fill your stomach first. Howler flipped his hand and took out 2 spirit fruits for them to eat. Okay. The 2 of them answered. When they were about to eat the fruits, they heard footsteps coming from outside. From the sound of it, it seemed that several people had come. Sect Master. The 2 disciples who were guarding saw the people who had come and hurriedly greeted them. You can leave. You don't have to wait here. If there's a need, I'll call you. Great Elder said and let the 2 disciples leave first. The 2 of them acknowledged and retreated. The 2 peak masters automatically stayed at the gate of the courtyard. However, they were facing the courtyard, listening and watching. After all, they were very curious about the origin of these 3 children. However, when the sect leader and a few elders entered the courtyard, they felt that the atmosphere in the courtyard was a little strange. They saw the 3 children sitting at the stone table with food on the table. Hence, the sect leader smiled and asked, "Are you eating?" However, when they approached, they saw that the dishes were a little messy. It seemed that they hadn't eaten. We didn't eat. These dishes aren't delicious. There's no meat and no soup. You said softly. She leaned on the stone table with both hands. The bright red spirit fruit in her hand also fell into the eyes of the sect master and several elders. Seeing that bright red spirit fruit, their eyes narrowed and their breathing became a little chaotic. Their footsteps couldn't help but take a big step forward. However, at this moment, a gaze that they couldn't ignore fell on them with a strong pressure, causing their bodies to instinctively stiffen. Turning around, they saw that silver wolf lying not far away and staring at them. It even opened its mouth as if it was yawning, revealing its sharp wolf teeth. Your fruit? The sect master asked. Before he could finish, he saw the little girl holding the fruit and taking a bite. While eating, she said, "We're hungry. The food isn't delicious, so we can only eat this fruit." Crunch. At the side, Muchin also took a bite of the spirit fruit under the scorching gazes of those people. He ate neither hurriedly nor slowly. The chewing sounds made the sect master and several elders swallow their saliva. Even if they had never seen that spirit fruit, they knew that it was definitely extraordinary given its rich spiritual energy. Now, they were eating it to fill their stomachs. What a waste. 17. Take the food away. Take the crystals and let them make it again. Howler only spoke at this time. The sect master and the rest. Third elders, in a while, tell the kitchen. And let the kitchen's tea. Third elder third, in a while. L. The third elder nodded and said to 17 with a smile, "Go outside and call 2 disciples in. Tell them to remove these things. There's no need to give crystal stones to the kitchen. I'll tell them later." Chapter 45-90. It didn't take much time to bring the sect master and the rest's portion from the kitchen. Because the 3 children hadn't eaten and said they were hungry, it wasn't appropriate for them to ask at this time. Seeing that the dishes were almost served, the sect master said, "You all eat first. We'll sit outside for a while. When you're done eating, we have some questions to ask you." Okay. Howler answered and scooped a small bowl of stewed soup for you to drink. He also scooped a bowl for Muchin. Yuer's eyes lit up when she saw the different dishes, and she ate with a smile. The sect master and the rest who were standing under a tree not far away from the courtyard looked at the courtyard and sighed silently. Sect master, the spirit fruit they ate just now seemed to be a longevity fruit. Fourth elder said and paused for a moment before continuing, that longevity fruit can increase one's lifespan. It's a treasure no matter where you put it, but I didn't expect them to eat an ordinary fruit. What a waste. The sovereign let out a sigh of relief. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Actually, after coming here, I don't think there's much of a need to ask anymore. A child who can take out 2 spirit fruits, who has a sacred beast protecting him, and whose surname is Xianyuan, if not the child of those 2, whose child could it be?" It said that when the ghost doctor's children were born, they were indeed twins. And at that time, there was a big commotion. All the sovereigns went to congratulate and give their blessings. Look at the 2 little ones, they look so delicate and have such a temperament at such a young age. It's not right to say that they're not their children. The first elder said, but he was slightly puzzled. He said, "But, if it's their child, why would he be wandering outside? Let's wait until they finish eating before asking the reason. Even if it's confirmed, we have to hear it from them personally." While they were talking here, on the other side, after the 3 children finished eating, they touched their stomachs and burped. Howler looked at 17 and asked, "Did you leave a portion for yourself?" 17 was startled and shook his head. "No need, the young masters and misses can't finish it. 17 can eat the rest." He had heard that this was different from the previous ones. The rice was all spirit rice, the meat was also spirit beast meat, and the soup was also stewed with precious medicinal herbs. When the people in the kitchen heard that the food that the peak master and the sect master ate was sent here, they were all dumbfounded. How could he have the nerve to ask for another portion of such precious food? Moreover, the 3 little masters couldn't finish it. He had enough leftovers from them. However, Howler frowned when he heard that. He saw that there was still quite a lot of food on the table. The soup was scooped out, the dishes were picked out, and the remaining food was untouched. It was fine for his own people to eat, so he said to 17, "Just make do with what you have today." "Yes." 17 hurriedly responded. Seeing the 3 of them leave the courtyard, he went forward to tidy up the dishes and soup and put them aside. He would eat later. Just as he was about to follow them, he saw the silver wolf walk past him. "You don't have to follow me. Go eat. I'll go take a look." As the silver wolf spoke, it walked forward with steady steps, following behind the 3 children unhurriedly. Seeing this, 17 returned to the courtyard and quickly dealt with the remaining things. Under the tree, the sect master and the others smiled when they saw the 3 children. "Is the food to your liking?" Yes, it's delicious. I'm full," Yu said with a smile. Chapter 45-91. When the 2 little ones heard this, they looked at him in surprise, as if they were surprised that he knew. Howler glanced at them and said, "That's right." Even though they had already believed it in their hearts, when they heard them admit it, their hearts couldn't help but tremble violently. They were really the children of those 2. Their breathing instantly became chaotic, and their breathing became slightly rough. They looked at each other, and among them, Great Elder couldn't help but ask, "Then how did you come to the mortal world? And there's no one protecting you. Didn't you inform your parents?" Questions came out of Great Elder's mouth one after another. What he asked was exactly what the sect leader and the rest wanted to know. "We met with some accidents, and it's hard to explain in a few words. Since you know our identities now, then do you have any way to help us contact our parents?" Howler asked, and his gaze fell on the sect leader. "As long as you can help us contact them and let us return, we will definitely let them thank you generously when we see them in the future." Hearing this, the few of them who had finally calmed down with great difficulty suddenly became emotional again. Not only the few elders, but even the sect leader's eyes were filled with disbelief and surprise. "You mean, as long as we help you return to their side, there will be generous gifts in the future?" The sect leader couldn't help but ask. The generous gift he was thinking of was none other than the ghost doctor's elixir. The ghost doctor Fingzhou's name had spread throughout the heaven realm. Any cultivator with some cultivation had heard of her name and knew that her alchemy skills were unparalleled. One of her elixirs could allow a cultivator who had been stagnant for many years to break through easily. No matter how serious the illness was, as long as she was willing, it would naturally be cured. However, the ghost doctor's elixirs were priceless, and it wasn't easy to get one of her elixirs. If they could protect the 3 children safely and let them return to their side, perhaps they could get her elixirs. Moreover, this kind of protection was far more useful than other benefits. Thinking of this, they looked at each other excitedly and secretly clenched their fists, calming their fluctuating emotions. The sect leader took a deep breath and asked tentatively, "What if we don't want anything else, and just want an elixir that can help us advance?" "Sure." As Hao spoke, he looked at them and said, "During this period of time before we return, ensure our safety. At the same time, find a way to help us return to our parents' side. I can promise you that after everything is done, each of you will be given a medicinal pill to help you advance." This was because their mother was not the only one who knew how to refine pills for advancement. Fan Lin also knew how to refine pills. This was not a difficult task. "Good. Leave it to us." The sect leader's eyes lit up as he spoke, his face filled with joy. After they settled the matter here, Hao and the other 2 returned to the courtyard first. The sect master and several elders discussed for a while, then called the 2 peak masters over and roughly explained the situation to them. They also told them that there was no need to send people to guard the courtyard. At the same time, they were to be treated as distinguished guests. Chapter 4592. There are some wandering cultivators from other heavenly realms here. We can put up a notice to search for them. The sect master paused for a moment before continuing, "The 3 children and the silver wolf are here. Even if we want to seal off the news, we can't do so for long. There are too many people in the sect. As time passes, even if no one can guess their origins, that sacred beast is bound to attract other people's attention." "Then what do you mean, sect master?" an elder asked. "I'm going to put up a notice to search for those wandering cultivators. Then, I'll ask if any of them are from the heavenly realm where the ghost doctor is from. When the news of the 3 children being here can no longer be hidden, then we'll release the news directly. But that will be risky because they have many enemies." At this point, the sect master's brows furrowed. "But this way, the news will spread quickly. If the ghost doctor's enemies know, then the ghost doctor's people will also know. Before that, what we need to do is to ensure their safety." "We understand. Let's do that then," First Elder said and stood up. "I'll go make the arrangements now." Thus, they quickly went to make the arrangements. On the other side, Hao and the rest sat in the courtyard, looking at each other with their chins in their hands. "Big brother, how long do you think it will take for them to help us find a way to go back?" Yu asked curiously. Hao shook his head. "I don't know. But if we want to go back quickly, as long as we make a big commotion here, Mother and the rest will know." "A big commotion. Then do we do it?" Yu blinked and asked. Mu Qin heard and said, "If we make a big commotion, Mother and the rest will know. Father and Mother's enemies will also know. If we fall into the enemy's hands before they find us, then it will be troublesome. Let's wait and see first. This matter can't be rushed." Hao said and looked at the 2. "During this period, you have to cultivate more. If you encounter danger in the future, you must think of a way to keep yourself safe." "Yes, we know," they replied. After staying in the courtyard for a while, they returned to their rooms to rest. On the other side, Guan Shilin rushed back to the floating land. When he saw that Feng Zhou was gradually recovering, he said, Xiao Zhou, I went to Mo Zai's world to investigate. On the day he encountered the heavenly tribulation during his advancement, the mountains and earth in the heaven realm he was in collapsed and the weather changed. The storm lasted for 3 days. I stayed there for a few days and checked out the news before rushing back. Feng Zhou listened, pursed his lips, and asked, Is his spiritual power still there? Guan Shilin nodded. That's right. Although there are some changes in his world, his spiritual power is still there. It's just that it has become very weak. If you don't look carefully, you won't be able to detect it. He looked at her and wanted to tell her that the mental strength was so weak that it was almost undetectable. It was very likely that Mose was doomed. However, when he saw her eyes light up after hearing what he said, he could not help but swallow the words that were at the tip of his tongue back down. She still had hope in her heart. How could he bear to destroy her hope? I knew it. He won't die so easily. Chapter 45-93. When Wanyan Qianhua saw this, he asked, What do you plan to do now? Do you still want to look for the child first? I heard from Lang Hua and Du Fan that you've already searched a lot of places. You've also made a rough estimate. Who knows when you'll meet them or get news of them? Let's look for the child first. Mose. Feng Zhou paused and said, Where is he now? I don't know. The child hasn't been found yet. He's always wanted to look for the child. We have to find the child first. What other places haven't you searched? We'll help you look for the child too, Wanyan Qianhua said. When Feng Zhou heard this, he looked at her and Zhenju Shang who was beside her and said, You two have been here for a while now. You don't have the child with you. Are you not worried? Why don't you go back first? We'll look for the child. Our child is with his uncle at the Xiaoyao sect. You don't have to worry about him, Zhenju Shang said unhurriedly. Wanyan Qianhua added, Don't worry about him. Our child is like a little devil. Everyone in the Xiaoyao sect treats him like an ancestor. Even if we don't go back for a year or so, he won't miss us. When he heard this, Feng Zhou paused for a moment and said, All right then. I'll tell you the details of the other places to look. When Guan Shilin heard this, he followed them and gathered around. He was prepared to look for places that they hadn't searched yet and try his luck. Du Fan and the others who had been here for a day or two also gathered around when they saw this. They listened to their master talk and looked at the places where they hadn't found the child. Do you guys think that they've reached the mortal world? Otherwise, how could there be no news of them at all? Guan Shilin pointed at the map drawn by Feng Zhou and said, This place is marked as the mortal realm. You haven't looked for it yet. Why don't I look for it here? Feng Zhou thought for a moment and said, That's fine. If you have any news, send us a message. We'll split up and search for the remaining places. Thus, they planned the location in the room. Zhenju Shang's Wanyan Qianhua had been accompanying Feng Zhou these days and could be considered to be resting. Now that they had divided the heaven realm to search, the two of them left first. Master, we'll go and look for them as well. We'll inform you through the communication jade token once we have any news. Du Fan looked at Feng Zhou and said, Go. Feng Zhou nodded. After watching the two of them leave, he said to Guan Shilin, Brother, you just came back. Rest for a day before you leave. It's okay. I'm not tired. I'm leaving too. Take care of yourself and take care of your body. As he said this, he looked at Ling Shang and said, You stay by Xiao Zhou's side and watch over her. Okay. Ling Shang replied. Thus, everyone left one after another, leaving only Feng Zhou and Ling Shang, Ling Hua, and Ling Shang. Seeing their master looking outside, Ling Shang and his brother looked at each other and said, "Master, let's go too." "Yes, let's go," Fengjiu replied. He gathered his thoughts and went out with them. Half a month later, in the Mortal Territory's capital, Guan Shilin looked at the bustling Mortal Territory and thought of the rumors he heard during the past half a month. His eyes flashed. Chapter 4594. However, when he asked around, he heard that there had been traces of immortals here before. Along the way, he didn't see any traces of immortals. He strode forward and sat down at a tea stall by the side of the road, preparing to take a break and ask around for information. "Brother, have you heard of any immortals in the Imperial City?" Guan Shilin asked a few men who were drinking tea and chatting nearby. While they were talking, they suddenly heard someone ask about the immortals. They looked at that person and saw that he had a big beard and a strong waist. He looked mighty and extraordinary. While they were surprised, they said, "This is not a rare thing." Back then, they told him about the Emperor's order to search for traces of immortals and the immortals' arrival. After listening to their conversation, Guan Shilin frowned. He chatted with them for a while and asked them some questions. After that, he sat down and drank his tea while pondering. The spiritual energy in this place was sparse. It was extremely difficult for cultivators to advance in cultivation here. Even if there were cultivators, they wouldn't come here, not to mention, as he was thinking, he heard another man say, "What strange things don't happen in the Imperial City." Back then, wasn't the eldest young master of the Pan family supposed to not live past that night? Didn't he survive in the end? That's right. I heard that His Majesty sent an imperial physician to diagnose him. Almost all the physicians in the city went, and they all said that he wouldn't survive. Who would have thought that he would survive after one night? The physicians all said that the eldest son of the Pan family must have had some great luck. Hearing this, Guan Shilin was stunned. He turned to the man who spoke and asked, "What illness did the eldest son of the Pan family get? Who cured him in the end?" "Ha ha ha, I know you're not from here." The eldest son of the Pan family was ambushed on his way back and was carried back to the estate. He was hanging on by a thread. The physicians in the city didn't dare to treat him, and the imperial physician also asked the Pan family to prepare for his funeral. Who could cure him? He was the one who survived after one night. As the man spoke, he smiled, then lowered his voice and said, "Let me tell you, there are rumors in the city that the 3 children that the second young master of the Pan family brought back were probably celestial children. You didn't see how good those 3 children looked, and their auras, tsk, those who have seen them all say that even the princes in the palace can't compare." Guan Shilin's eyes flashed and his heart jumped. 3 children? What kind of children? Are they still there? 2 boys and 1 girl, but the boy is older. The other 2 are twins. I saw them shopping with the 2 sons of the Pan family. The Pan family said that they were distant relatives, but not long after the news of the immortal spread, the 3 children disappeared. Twins. Where are the Pan family? Where is it? Guan Shilin was so excited that he grabbed the man who spoke and asked, "What are you doing? Hurry up and let me go." Ouch. Guan Shilin gripped the man's wrist tightly. He was in so much pain that his face contorted. He could not break free from Guan Shilin's grip. He hurriedly pointed at Guan Shilin and said, "Almost everyone in the Imperial City knows about the Pan family." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw that person let go of his hand. In the next moment, he disappeared without a trace. Chapter 4595. Guan Shilin stood in front of a house and looked at the plaque in front of the door with the words, Pan's Mansion, written on it. He paused for a moment, then walked forward and knocked on the door. The housekeeper came to open the door and saw a man he had never seen before. He could not help but close the door halfway and looked at the man warily. "Who are you looking for?" The man in front of him had a beard that covered half of his face. He had a strong waist and a strong back, and his aura was very frightening. "I'm looking for your second son, Pan Ning," Guan Shilin said as he touched the beard on his chin. In fact, he had not shaved for half a month. Was it already very frightening? "May I know who you are?" the housekeeper asked again. "Tell your second son that I'm the uncle of the 3 children and that I'm here to inquire about them," Guan Shilin said in a low voice. Hearing this, the housekeeper was startled and said, "Please have a seat." He closed the door and hurried in to report. Pan Ning was talking to his eldest brother when the butler hurried in. "Eldest young master, second young master, there's a man with a strong waist and a strong back outside. He said he's young master Hao's uncle and is here to ask for information." Hearing this, the 2 people in the courtyard were slightly surprised. Pan Ning frowned and said, "Could he be a swindler?" Pan Hong, who was sitting next to him, said, "Let's go and have a look. We'll know if he's a swindler when we ask him." He said to the housekeeper, "Invite him to the front hall. We'll be there in a moment." "Yes," the housekeeper replied and left. "Let's go." Pan Hong gestured and pushed the wheelchair to the front yard. When Pan Ning saw this, he also followed. When the 2 of them came to the front hall, there was already a person sitting there drinking tea. Seeing them come in, the other party's gaze fell on them. When that person's gaze fell on the 2 of them, their hearts trembled. They looked at each other and braced themselves. The person did not speak, but the person's aura was obvious. His gaze was dignified and intimidating. It was definitely not something a swindler would have. "I'm Pan Ning. This is my elder brother Pan Hong. May I know who you are?" Pan Ning bowed and asked. "Guan Shilin," he said in a deep voice. His eyes swept across Pan Hong's legs, then landed on Pan Ning and said, "I heard that there were 3 children living here some time ago." "That's right, he's a distant relative of mine," Pan Ning said, and his eyes fell on Guan Shilin, secretly sizing him up. Pan Hong just looked at Guan Shilin without saying anything. Although this person had a beard that covered half of his face, one could still see that his facial features were very outstanding. However, he didn't believe that he was the uncle of Hao, and the other 2 at all. He couldn't help but be a little suspicious. Hearing that the 3 children were their distant relatives, Guan Shilin didn't say anything. He only asked, "Is the older one around 10 years old?" The 2 younger ones are only 3 or 4 years old. They're twins, and they look exactly the same. Are they very exquisite? That's right. Pan Ning replied. This was not a secret. They had taken the children out before, and many people in the city had seen their faces. Chapter 4596. Sir, you say that they are your nephews. How can you prove that? Pan Hong, who had been silent all this while, asked in a calm voice. Guan Shilin smiled. He had a good impression of their attentiveness and vigilance. After all, no one would inform them of the 3 children's whereabouts as soon as they arrived. This was obviously to protect the safety of the 3 children. Thus, the aura on his body slowed down, and he took a sip of tea before he said, "How do you want me to prove it? You may not know what I know." The Pan family's 2 brothers looked at each other. Pan Hong said, "Then, honored sir, please tell us, we're listening." Guan Shilin looked at him and said, "Of the 3 children, the eldest is called Xianyuan Hao, the two boys are the older brothers, Xianyuan, and the younger sister is Xianyuan. They were accidentally stranded outside because something happened to them. They are not from your mortal world. His gaze fell on Pan Hong as he said, although you're sitting in a wheelchair now, the injuries on your body back then should have been fatal. The reason you're still alive is probably because they took their mother's medicinal pills to save you, right? Guan Shilin paused and smiled. To be able to get them to take out pills to save you, it seems that you have treated them well. When they heard this, their hearts shook. They were almost certain that this person was indeed the uncle of Hao, and the others. They were about to speak when he spoke again. I wonder if they have told you that their mother is the ghost doctor? The Pan brothers looked at each other and said, Sir, we believe you. However, the three of them are no longer with us. Guan Shilin frowned and asked, then where did they go? Could it be that someone had taken them away? Is there anything wrong with their health? At first, they didn't tell us in detail. Later on, I asked them, but the two younger ones couldn't seem to remember what their parents looked like. They seemed to have forgotten some of their memories. However, Hao didn't. Hao was very protective of his younger siblings and took good care of them. There's no problem with their health. Don't worry about that. Pan Ning said, no one took them away. However, the thing is, back then that he recounted how he had met the three children, how he had brought them back to the Pan family, how they had lived in the Pan family, what had happened to them when they entered the palace, and how they had left in the end. Everything was explained in detail to him. Guan Shilin's heart ached when he heard about the three children's experiences. They were still so young and had to face this alone. Fortunately, Hao was by Mu Qin and Mu Yu's side. Otherwise, they would have suffered a lot. So, you don't know where the island they are going to? Guan Shilin looked at them. We don't know. He only told us that it was called Floating Fate Immortal Island. He said that he wanted to go there and see if he could find the way back. Pan Ning said. Guan Shilin didn't speak for a long time. He thought that he would be able to find their whereabouts, but he didn't expect that the Pan family didn't know where it was. However, at least they knew that they were in the mortal world. Chapter 4597. After they left, Guan Shilin informed Du Fan, Wanyan Qianhua, and the others about the news through the communication jade, asking them to come over and help with the search. As for Fengzhou, they didn't want her to be happy for nothing, so they didn't inform her. They planned to wait until they found the children and confirmed their location before telling her. At the same time, in the sect, as the news spread, almost every day, there were cultivators coming from all over the place, wanting to see Hao, Mu Qin, Mu Yu, and that sacred beast. There was no other reason other than that they heard that the three children were Fengzhou's children, so they couldn't help but be curious. However, very quickly, another piece of news spread that there were only three children and a sacred beast here. Other than that, there were no other strong cultivators around to protect them. Once this news spread, almost all the strong cultivators were tempted. However, even if they had any ideas, they only dared to think about it, and didn't dare to put them into action. However, there were still some people who wanted to take the risk. After all, there were only three children here, but there were no strong cultivators to protect them. If they could capture the three children, then find a way to break the contract between them and the sacred beast, and contract with the sacred beast themselves, just thinking about it made them excited, and it was hard for them to look up to themselves. And those who had such thoughts were only those who didn't have any family, and had been training and adventuring outside all year round. They didn't have any so-called worries, and only thought about themselves. Success or failure, they only had their own lives. Therefore, even if there was only a slim chance, they still wanted to give it a try. As for those who had families, they didn't dare to have such thoughts. Even if they didn't fear the sacred beast, they were still afraid of the parents behind the three children. Those two were legendary figures, even if they weren't in the same heaven realm, they had heard of their famous names. How could they dare to offend them? Moreover, there were people from the sect protecting them. If they were to lay their hands on the children, it would be purely asking for trouble. One day, Hao was watching Mu Qin and Mu Yu practice martial arts in the yard. Suddenly, he jumped onto a big tree in the yard. Sitting on the tree, he plucked a few leaves and threw them at the two little figures below. Mu Qin and Mu Yu saw their eldest brother climb up the tree. When they were about to stop, they saw a hidden weapon coming. The two of them immediately dodged, but who would have thought that another hidden weapon would also come? When they turned over and jumped away, they saw that the so-called hidden weapon was actually just two leaves, and it was shot by their eldest brother. Before they had the chance to ask, the leaves came at them again. Each leaf was filled with spiritual power and was as sharp as a knife. Initially, there were only 3 to 5 leaves, but as more and more leaves attacked them, the two little fellows became a little anxious as they dodged, and their breathing became a little heavy. Hao used the leaves to practice their agility. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he saw a leaf flying towards you, but you, didn't have enough time to dodge. Seeing that the leaf was about to slash her arm, he immediately stretched out his hand and flicked. A stream of air attacked and bounced that leaf away, resolving the possibility of you, being injured. Chapter 4598. Hearing this, Hao nodded. That's all for today. Read some books or practice your handwriting. I'm going out for a while and will be back later. You're going out? You're not bringing us along? Mu Qin asked. I'm not leaving the sect. I'm going out quietly to check on the situation and will be back in a while. You don't have to leave, I'll leave the silver wolf here to accompany you. As Hao spoke, he looked at the silver wolf resting at the corner of the wall. After giving some instructions, he walked out of the courtyard alone. In the grand hall, the venerables and peak masters who did not know that Hao had promised the grand master and the elders the advancement elixirs were all confused and angry. Grand Master, those 3 children can't stay in our sect. We have to chase them out. That's right. Previously, we didn't know that they were the ghost doctor's children. Now that we know, and the news has already spread, if we keep them here, it will only bring endless trouble to our sect. Since we can't do anything to those 3 children, chasing them away isn't too much, right? That's right, sect leader. It's not worthwhile for us to sacrifice our sect for the sake of 3 unrelated children. Furthermore, they have a sacred beast protecting them. Even if we let them leave, ordinary people would not be able to get close to them. Since that's the case, why should we keep them in our sect? Grand Master, let them leave. Elders, please persuade the Grand Master. We have nothing to do with those 3 children. Why should we sacrifice our sect's elite disciples for them? These 2 days, the disciples have been guarding the mountain gate to prevent people from sneaking in. More than 10 disciples have already died. If this continues, when will it end? Hearing the venerables and peak masters talking in the hall, the Grand Master was a little upset. He frowned and glanced at them. That ghost Dr. Fingzhou is the monarch of heaven and earth. His name is known far and wide. Now that their children have come here and no one is protecting them, since we've met them and they happen to be in our sect, how can we push them out? Besides, they're 3 young children. He glanced at the crowd and said in a deep voice, if it's really as you say, and the 3 children are pushed out, if they encounter danger outside, will you be able to feel at ease? Besides, even if we push them out now and let them leave our sect, will it really have nothing to do with us? We've already chosen to protect them, so we have to protect them to the end. Today, I'll say it right here. No matter what happens, we have to protect them. As the Grand Master spoke, he paused for a moment and looked at the seated elder. Grand Elder, how's the information we've gathered going? The first elder shook his head and said, over 100 people have come to our sect in the past half a month. I've investigated them one by one. Most of them have evil intentions and want to take the 3 children away. However, there's a wandering cultivator whose strength is unfathomable. It's said that he came from somewhere else. We've already arranged for him to stay in the guest courtyard. Good. The Grand Master said, then slapped his thigh and said, I'm relieved to leave this matter to you. If there's anything you need to mobilize the disciples, just do it. He then handed a token to him. Chapter 45-99. Let's disperse. As the sect leader spoke, he stood up and looked at the crowd. Keep your thoughts to yourself. Right now, the people are with our sect leader. Protecting their safety is the most important thing. Don't think about anything else. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked out of the room. On the other side, Howard avoided everyone and walked around the sect to find out what was going on. When he found out that the 3rd elder had brought his disciples to guard the sect gate, he walked around and roughly understood the current situation. He then returned to his courtyard. However, 2 days later, a mighty group of people surrounded the sect. When the 3rd elder, who was guarding the mountain gate, saw the people who had come, his expression changed. He immediately ordered the disciples beside him to quickly report to the sect leader. Quick! Go and get the sect leader. Tell him that the elder of the Black Mountain sect has come personally. When the disciple heard this, he immediately turned around and rushed into the sect to report. When the rogue cultivators who were originally at the sect gate saw that the group was from the famous Black Mountain sect, their faces changed slightly and they immediately retreated. Look, that's the old ancestor of the Black Mountain sect, the old ancestor of the Mountain Demon sect. I heard that he has reached the heavenly god realm and his strength is extraordinary. Looks like he's here for the sacred beast. If it is him, the others will have no hope. The elder of the Mountain Demon sect is notorious and is not easy to deal with. He will not care if that is the child of the ghost Dr. Fingzhou. Moreover, the mountain is high and the emperor is far away. It is said that the ghost Dr. Fingzhou and the rest are not here. That's right. With the elder of the Mountain Demon sect's strength, he might be able to subdue that sacred beast. Moreover, even the sect leader is not as powerful as the elder of the Mountain Demon sect. It seems that this time, the sect will have to hand over the children and the sacred beast. Otherwise, the sect will not be able to hold on. The rogue cultivators around were discussing. Their words were filled with emotions and excitement. They wanted to know, in the face of such a strong enemy, would the sect still insist on protecting the 3 children and the sacred beast? In the sect leader's face changed when he heard the news. He immediately stood up and said, What? Who did you say came? His eyes widened in shock. His usual calmness was gone, replaced by shock. The Black Mountain sect's Mountain Demon ancestor has come personally. The 3rd elder ordered me to quickly invite the sect leader over. The disciple hurriedly reported what the 3rd elder had told him to do. The great elder beside him had a solemn expression on his face. This Black Mountain sect's Mountain Demon patriarch has been in seclusion for many years. I didn't expect him to come out at this time. If he comes, sect leader, what should we do? No one in their sect had the strength to deal with the Mountain Demon patriarch. If they were to fight him head-on, they were afraid. Let me think. The Grand Master paced around the courtyard with his hands behind his back. The anxiety on his face was obvious. The first elder and the others stood to the side, feeling uneasy and hesitant. They knew that once the identities of the 3 children were known, they would attract powerful enemies. However, they did not expect that even the mountain demon ancestor, who had been in seclusion for many years, would come. This person had become famous in his early years. His methods were cruel, and his battle prowess was extraordinary. If they were to go against him, they would only end up dead. Chapter 4600. What the elders were thinking was exactly what the sect leader was thinking. Right from the start, they didn't have the heart to protect the 3 children. They even wanted to take advantage of the 3 children and that sacred beast. It was who promised them that as long as they were safe, he would give each of them an elixir when they returned. Only then did they change their attitude. Now that the threat had expanded to the point where it was directly related to their lives, they naturally compared the benefits to the danger at hand. After some consideration, they came up with an idea. Let's go and take a look. If you can persuade him to leave, then do your best to do so. If you really have no other choice, then... The sect master's voice paused. He fell silent and didn't continue speaking. Okay, we will listen to you, sect leader. The 3 elders agreed. Then let's go. The sect leader said and walked out quickly. At the mountain gate, the 3rd elder smiled and said, "The mountain demon ancestor has not stepped out of the Black Mountain sect for many years. I did not expect him to come to our sect today. It is our fortune." Yuan-san, it seems like you have not improved in all these years. The person who spoke had a head of gray hair and a face that looked like a young man in his 20s. He was wearing a black cloak that covered his entire body. Only his head was exposed from the neck up. His hands were hidden in the cloak, not revealing a bit of his body. His face was not outstanding. It could be said that he was so ordinary that people would forget him after a glance. However, his eyes were filled with viciousness and bloodlust. He was vicious and vicious. When his eyes landed on people, they could not help but shiver. It was as if they were being stared at by a poisonous snake. They were so afraid that they could not help but want to run away. The 3rd elder was like that. However, he forced himself to stay calm. He hoped that the sect leader would come quickly. At the same time, he was also dealing with him. My talent is limited and I cannot compare to the mountain demon ancestor. However, I wonder if the mountain demon ancestor is here to meet our sect leader. Or is there something else? Why are you beating around the bush? I'm already here. Don't tell me you still can't guess my intentions. He sneered and looked at the 3rd elder. Stop stalling for time. What I want to do today, even if all of you come out in full force, you won't be able to stop me. If you know what's good for you, you'd better hurry up and bring out the person I want and that legendary beast. As he spoke, the pressure on his body spread out and attacked the mountain gate in front of him. The disciple guarding the mountain gate hugged his head and screamed. He couldn't help but squat down and scream. The 3rd elder's expression changed. He immediately shouted, "Mountain demon! You, an exalted celestial deity powerhouse, have the cheek to make a move against my sect's disciple. Aren't you afraid of being labeled as a bully? Ha 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 ha." His maniacal laughter rang out as he threw his head back to the sky. His laughter was accompanied by an oppressive aura that permeated the air. That powerful aura rippled through the air like a demonic tune that entered the ears of the sect disciples, causing them to squat down one by one as they cried out in pain. Chapter 4601. Please have mercy. The sect master's voice rang out with a hint of urgency. When he spoke, a stream of chi spread out from the sect, blocking off the mountain demon ancestors' chi and creating a protective barrier for the disciples of the sect. When the disciples of the sect saw that their sect masters' elders, as well as the sect's venerables and peak masters, they couldn't help but feel relieved. Their faces were filled with excitement. Now that their sect leader was here, he would definitely be able to fight the mountain demon ancestor. Even if their sect leader was no match for the mountain demon ancestor would not be able to gain the upper hand with the combined strength of everyone in the sect. The mountain demon ancestor grunted softly when he saw them, and then he withdrew his pressure. He looked at the group of people that were rushing over, and his gloomy voice carried a trace of arrogance and domineeringness as he said, "I'm not so good-tempered as to waste my time talking nonsense with all of you. Immediately bring the man and the beast out. Otherwise, I'll start a massacre today. Our sect and the Black Mountain sect have always minded our own business. Today, you've come up the mountain and humiliated us. Do you really think that there's no one in our sect who can stop you?" Even the sect leader, who wanted to make peace with the mountain demon ancestor, was embarrassed to be humiliated in front of so many people. "I've said that I only want the 3 children and the sacred beast. If you don't hand them over obediently, don't blame me for being rude," the mountain demon ancestor said in a low voice. "I'm sure you know where the 3 children came from. How dare you lay your hands on them? Aren't you afraid that the ghost Dr. Fingzhou will come after you?" The sect leader used the name of the ghost Dr. Fingzhou to threaten him. "Ha ha ha ha. The ghost Dr. Fingzhou. Where is she? Where is she? I'd like to meet the ghost Dr. Fingzhou and see if she's as powerful as the rumors say. However, where is she? Call her out." The mountain demon ancestor looked askance at the sect leader and sneered, "If you can't call her out, then hand over the children." "You!" The sect leader's eyes were filled with anger as he clenched his fists tightly under his sleeves. However, he did not dare to act rashly due to his opponent's strength. However, if they were to lower their heads and bring her out to them in front of so many people, not only would they lose face, but if they really did that, they would not be able to raise their heads in front of the disciples of the sect and the people of the aristocratic families. "It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't bring him out." The old ancestor of the mountain demon sect curled his lips into a bloodthirsty smile. "Kill them. Kill. Kill. Kill, kill, kill." The words "kill" came out one after another, shaking the hearts of the surrounding people. They couldn't help but take a step back. Almost at the same time, the people of the Black Mountain sect rushed forward and attacked the disciples of the Black Mountain sect. Once the killing intent was triggered, it immediately exploded. The two sides who were originally standing opposite each other instantly entered a chaotic battle. The clanging of swords and sabers could be heard, accompanied by shouts and screams. As the battle started, the smell of blood filled the air. Seeing that both sides had entered a chaotic battle, the sect leader did not care about anything else. He immediately led the people behind him into the battle to prevent too many elite disciples from dying. Chapter 4602. It was a pair of pale and old hands, forming a strong contrast with his face. Blue veins could be seen on his hands, his skin was wrinkled, and there were black age spots on his skin. However, as he moved his hands, a visible stream of air formed between his fingers. As he moved his hands, the stream of air in his hands became stronger and stronger. Soon after, the stream of air shot towards the sect master at a speed that was too fast for one to cover one's ears. Whoosh! Whoosh! The air current carried a sharp sound as it streaked across the air, emitting a whistling sound. It smashed heavily into the disciples of both sides that were fighting with irresistible force, and then landed on the body of the sect leader. Ah! The disciples from both sides were sent flying by the airflow, and they let out shrill screams. Those disciples were unable to block the airflow, so when the airflow hit the sect leader, even the sect leader spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was sent flying several meters away, and he lost his balance and fell to the ground. With a muffled groan, the blood in his chest surged upwards, directly gushing out from his throat and overflowing from the corner of his mouth. Sect leader! Sect leader! Cries of alarm rang out. The disciples who were originally fighting also stopped fighting when they saw that their sect leader was injured. The people of Black Mountain sect also retreated behind the mountain devil old ancestor with a wave of his hand. From the beginning to the end, he didn't look at the disciples from Black Mountain sect who died because of the airflow. It was as if their lives were as lowly as ants in his eyes. They weren't worth mentioning at all. The mountain demon ancestor put his hand back into his cloak again. He walked forward slowly, and with every step he took, the people from the other sects took a step back. When they couldn't retreat anymore, they could only watch with pale faces as the mountain demon ancestor walked forward step by step. The elders watched as he walked forward and looked down at their sect leader. However, no one dared to help their sect leader up. All of them held their breaths and watched with bated breath. "Do you want to die? Or hand those people over?" A vicious voice sounded. He stared at the pale-faced sect leader with bloodthirsty eyes. Suddenly, he laughed softly. That laughter was soft and sinister, and it made one's hair stand on end. The sect leader's heart was in his throat. However, he couldn't bring himself to push those people out in exchange for a chance to live in front of so many people. Even if he wanted to push those kids out to protect himself and the sect, he couldn't bring himself to do so at this moment. Anxiety and worry clashed in his heart. In the end, he glanced at the great elder and fainted as if he couldn't withstand the impact and his injuries were too severe. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted as well. Sect leader. Chapter 4603. When First Elder said this, the two venerables who knew that they had agreed to protect the three children couldn't help but look at each other, their eyes flashing. When they found out about the identities and origins of the three children, they immediately reported to the sect master. Later, they followed the sect master and several elders to the small courtyard. Although they were guarding the outer courtyard, they still heard the conversation at that time. They thought that the sect master and the elders had already anticipated the danger this time and would hold on until the very end. But who would have thought that? Their gazes moved away from the sect master's fluttering eyelashes and sighed inwardly. Who would have thought that the sect master would be so cowardly in front of this mountain demon ancestor? When the mountain demon ancestor heard this, his eyes narrowed viciously and the corners of his mouth twitched. He glanced at them with some mockery and his voice softened. "All right, I don't want to be enemies with you. As long as you bring them out, I naturally won't do anything to your sect." First Elder gritted his teeth and said, "All right. Mountain demon ancestor, wait here for a moment. I'll go get them out." He then turned to the two venerables and said, "Come with me." The two venerables paused but didn't say anything. They just nodded and followed them inside. Seeing them go in, the others carried the sect master to the side. The mountain demon ancestor glanced at the sect master who was pretending to be unconscious but didn't say anything. He only smiled mockingly and waited outside calmly. In this world where strength was everything, unless there was a decision to fight to the death, even the so-called righteous sects could only bow their heads in the face of a strong enemy. How and the rest didn't know what was going on outside, but 17, who had secretly come out to gather information, knew. When he saw that First Elder was going to hand them over, he quickly rushed back to the small courtyard. "Young master, this is bad. The people from this sect are planning to hand us over to this mountain demon ancestor. They're already bringing people here. Young master, what should we do? Although he was an adult, he couldn't help but ask for Hao-er's opinion and decision when faced with this matter. Hearing this, Hao-er, who was guiding Mu Qin and Mu Yu in the courtyard, asked, did the sect master and the elders agree? In fact, when he asked this question, he knew in his heart that they must have agreed. Otherwise, why would they agree to hand them over? The sect leader fainted after being injured, but I think he was faking it. He is no match for the mountain demon patriarch, and the other elders are no match for him either. They didn't dare to fight him directly. They negotiated that as long as they hand us over, they will retreat and won't attack the sect. Hence, the people of the sect have agreed. The Great Elder is also bringing people here. 17 hurriedly said, looking at him anxiously. Even the sect leader and the elders were no match for the mountain devil patriarch, much less the young masters. The only one who could fight against the mountain devil patriarch was probably the silver wolf. However, they had the advantage in numbers. If they fought, the silver wolf wouldn't be able to protect the 3 young masters. Moreover, his strength was nothing compared to those cultivators. Go. Take the small path behind the mountain. Chapter 4604. Okay. The 2 little fellows responded. The silver wolf had already arrived beside them and laid down beside them so that they could climb up. After they were seated, the silver wolf turned its head slightly and said, half lying down, grab onto my fur. Don't fall off. The 2 little fellows listened to it and lowered their bodies. Half lying on its back, they grabbed onto its fur with both hands. Then, it leaped up and ran out. Let's go. Hao-er pulled 17 and rode on his sword to the back of the mountain. There were usually fewer people here. Now that most of the sect's disciples had gone to the mountain gate in front, it was convenient for them to escape. However, Great Elder and the rest arrived quickly. When they saw that there was no one in the courtyard, their expressions changed. Oh no! They must have heard the news and ran away. Chase after them. If they couldn't bring them to the mountain demon ancestor, their sect would be in deep trouble. The 2 venerable ones stopped in their tracks and said hesitantly, Great Elder, we know that they're ghost Dr. Feng Zhou's children. If we hand them over and something happens to them, won't the ghost doctor come after us when she finds out? Seeing that they had stopped and did not chase after them, Great Elder stopped and shouted, how can I not know what you're talking about? However, if we don't hand them over today, our sect will be finished. Is there anyone in our sect who can withstand the strength of the mountain devil? No one. Even our sect leader is seriously injured and unconscious. What else can we do? Are we really going to throw away the lives of everyone in our sect for a few children who have no relatives or friends? The 2 supremacies fell silent and lowered their heads. What are you waiting for? Chase after them. As he said that, he flicked his sleeves and flew out quickly. However, he did not chase after Hao-er and the rest. Instead, he went to the other side to activate the formation and trap them first. Otherwise, once they escaped, they would not be able to explain to the mountain demon ancestor. Hao-er and the rest ran into some disciples on the way to the back of the mountain, but they were all pushed away by the silver wolf leading the way. As they went down the mountain, they heard sounds of pursuit behind them. Don't run. You can't run away, there are people guarding the foot of the mountain. Come back with us. Hao-er brought 17 along and sped up without even looking back. The silver wolf running in front did the same. However, when the silver wolf brought Mu Qin and Mu Yu to the foot of the mountain first, it stopped abruptly when it saw the cultivator guarding in front. At this moment, 17's exclamation came from behind. The silver wolf, Mu Qin, and Mu Yu quickly looked back and saw a hemispherical barrier that was visible to the naked eye, isolating the mountain. Hao, who was flying with 17 on his flying sword, couldn't dodge in time and directly crashed into the barrier. As a result, the barrier bounced back and the two fell off the flying sword and rolled on the ground. Big brother! Big brother! When Mu Chen and Mu Yu saw this, they couldn't help but shout anxiously. They hurriedly pulled on the silver wolf's fur and shouted, "Quick! Let's go back! Big brother can't get out!" Chapter 4605. However, when its paw touched the barrier, it was bounced off. It looked inside the barrier and saw that the people from the sect had caught up. It took a step back and said to the two little guys on its back, "Come down and stand aside. I'll see if I can break it." "Okay." The two little guys quickly came down and held hands as they stood aside obediently. At this moment, the cultivators at the foot of the mountain were discussing excitedly, "Look! Are those children Ghost Dr. Fengjiu's children? They're so good-looking. And that silver wolf. Hiss! It's so majestic. They're in trouble." The mountain demon patriarch personally came to capture them at the main gate. The people from the sect have already agreed to hand them over. "Look, even this array has been activated. I know a little about this sect's array. Once it's activated, no matter if it's inside or outside the sect, no one can enter or leave. Even if that silver wolf is a sacred beast, it probably won't be able to break it." The cultivators at the foot of the mountain were discussing. Someone even shouted, "There's no need to try. Unless the people from the sect personally open the barrier, outsiders won't be able to break it." The silver wolf didn't care about those people. It retreated and then charged forward. However, it didn't expect that its body would be bounced off the moment it hit the barrier. The force of the rebound was the same as the force of the collision. It somersaulted in mid-air and landed steadily. Fortunately, the two children weren't sitting on its back. Otherwise, they would have fallen. The two supremacies and a dozen disciples of the sect leader chased over. When they saw that Hao, and 17 were trapped inside the barrier while the silver wolf and the two children were outside the barrier, the two supremacies' expressions changed slightly and they heaved a sigh of relief. If they were facing the silver wolf directly, they wouldn't dare to get close. They didn't expect the Great Elder to activate the array to keep the silver wolf outside. "Come back with us. You won't be able to leave," one of the supremacies said. "Your sect is full of shameless people who go back on their words." "Go back with you? Impossible," Hao said coldly and looked straight at the two supremacies. Being criticized by a child in front of them, the two supremacies' faces heated up and they felt ashamed. They took a deep breath and said, "Our sect has already done its best to protect you. We can't lose the entire sect for you. We hope you can understand. Since you can't do it, you shouldn't have agreed. Since you agreed, you shouldn't have gone back on your word and put us in danger." Hao looked at them with disdain. "You're all over thousands of years old, but you're scheming against us children. You want us to understand. Dream on." As soon as he finished speaking, his hand moved, and his long sword was already attacking the two of them. The enchantment had sealed off their path, so they could only fight. However, even if Hao was at the peak of the Gold Core realm, it was impossible for him to deal with two venerables without the silver wolf by his side. Seeing him make a move, Mu Chen and Mu Yu, who were outside the boundary, became anxious. "What should we do? Big brother can't beat them. What should we do?" Yu anxiously stomped her feet and shouted at the people inside the barrier, "If you dare to hurt my big brother, my mother will definitely not let you off." Chapter 4606. They didn't dare to fight back for fear of hurting this young man. On the other hand, Heartwarming's attacks closed in on them step by step. For a moment, it also made it somewhat strenuous for the two to dodge. At this moment, the dozen or so disciples behind them quietly surrounded 17. To deal with a low-level cultivator like 17 who had just started cultivating, any one of the disciples could absolutely suppress him. It didn't take long for them to capture 17. "Stop. Otherwise, we'll kill him." A disciple holding 17 shouted as he pressed the sword in his hand against 17's neck. 17. You exclaimed, and her pair of beautiful big eyes emitted flames of anger. Mu-chin pursed his lips and clenched his fists. He didn't say anything and just stared coldly at the disciple holding the sword against 17's neck. Heartwarming stopped. His gaze was as sharp as a knife as he looked coldly at that disciple. That cold gaze made that disciple shudder and involuntarily shrink back. However, his hand that was holding the sword on 17's neck did not move away. "Capture him!" A shout was heard. First Elder rushed over with people and immediately ordered the disciples to capture Heartwarming. "Young master, don't worry about me." 17 shouted and struggled, but he was cut by the sword and blood seeped out of his neck. 17, don't move. Heartwarming shouted coldly. His cold little face was as cold as ice. His gaze swept across 17's bleeding neck and then stared at the disciple. He said word by word, "If he dies, I want you and your family to be buried with him." Because of these words and also because of Heartwarming's cold gaze and serious expression, the disciple was pushed back. The disciple was forced back. His face turned pale and his lips trembled. He couldn't help but take a step back and carefully moved the sword away from 17's neck. He was afraid that 17 would die under his sword again. 17 listened to Heartwarming's words with tears in his eyes and a lump in his throat. He stood stiffly and didn't move. He watched as a few disciples went forward and tied Heartwarming up with ropes. "I'm sorry, young master. I've implicated you." He lowered his head in self-reproach and felt very guilty. "It's not your fault. I can't beat them." Heartwarming stared coldly at the first elder as he spoke. At the same time, he ordered, "Silver Wolf, take Chin and you away." "I'm not leaving. I want to go with Big Brother." You shouted. "I'm not leaving either," Mu-chin said, standing still. The Silver Wolf glanced at the two little guys and did not say anything. Because even if they fled with them now, they didn't know where they'd flee to. Not to mention that they were so young, so how could they survive without Heartwarming and 17 by their side? In addition, Heartwarming was its contracted master. It couldn't just leave him like that. "Ha ha 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 ha, you can't leave even if you want to." A wild and sinister laughter rang out. His tone was filled with excitement and viciousness. The Silver Wolf immediately turned around and stood in front of the two little fellows to protect them. Its bloodthirsty and ferocious eyes stared at the large group of people who were rushing towards them. Its vigilant gaze swept past those people and landed on the cultivator who was wearing a black cloak at the front. Chapter 4607. The Silver Wolf glanced at him and let out 2 heavy breaths from its nose. At the same time, it raised one of its wolf claws, revealing its razor-sharp claws. It stuck out its tongue and gently licked it. It did not say anything, but its posture and actions were extremely threatening in the eyes of others. It flashed its sharp wolf claws in front of everyone and licked them gently with its tongue. It was like an azura sharpening its blade and preparing to kill. It made everyone's heart tremble and become vigilant. The people from the Black Mountain sect did not dare to go near the Silver Wolf. It was a sacred beast. Its aura could make them all lie down. The only person they could count on was their ancestor. To the ancestor of the mountain demon sect, who had cultivated for many years and had reached the heavenly god realm, seeing such a dazzling sacred beast made him excited and want to tame it. Hence, when he saw the silver wolf's provocative and threatening actions, he laughed sinisterly. His gaze swept past the two children standing behind the silver wolf and landed on the silver wolf in front. Today, let me have a go at you. Let's see how strong a sacred beast is. The moment the excited and sinister voice sounded, the black cloak moved and the aura from his body spread out. The people behind him quickly retreated, not daring to get too close. Under the cloak, he revealed a pair of old and spotted hands. Clenching his hands into fists, he rushed forward and punched the silver wolf in front of him. Back off a little. The silver wolf whispered to the two children. Before the ancestor of the mountain demon sect could reach him, it pounced on him and tried to increase the distance between them to prevent their battle from injuring the two children. Shio! The sharp sound of the air sliced through the air. The silver wolf leaped up and its sharp claws reflected a bloodthirsty light under the sunlight. It slashed at the ancestor of the mountain demon sect. Hiss! The ancestor of the mountain demon sect did not expect the silver wolf to be as fast as lightning. Even with his strength, he could not dodge it. On the contrary, his attack was easily dodged by the silver wolf. Pang pang pang. When the silver wolf's sharp claws tore through space, there were several streaks of sharp air currents visible to the naked eye. Not only did they tear through the mountain demon ancestor's black robes, they directly left behind deep bloody gashes from his arm to the back of his hand. Even the remaining air currents produced pang-pang sounds when they passed by the ground, as if sword energy was hacking down. Once the sacred beast's aura spread out, even the mountain demon ancestor, who was at the heavenly god level, could not help but sweat. Hiss! Ancestor! Ancestor, be careful. Seeing that their old ancestor had actually been injured after exchanging blows with the sacred beast, everyone's face could not help but change. Even the faces of the people from the sect were somewhat ugly. If the ancestor of the mountain demon sect, it would be fine if he could not. Bloodthirsty killing intent surged in the silver wolf's heart, and it didn't give the mountain demon ancestor a chance to catch his breath. After injuring the mountain demon ancestor, it saw the mountain demon ancestor stumble back and immediately pounced forward again. It raised its head and howled, revealing its sharp and bloodthirsty fangs as it viciously pounced on the mountain demon ancestor. Chapter 4608. Regardless of whether it was the people from the sect, the Black Mountain sect, or the other rogue cultivators, they didn't feel anything strange when they heard the howl. At this moment, their attention was focused on the battle between the mountain devil ancestor and the silver wolf. They wanted to see how the battle between the man and the silver wolf would end. Unfortunately, both the mountain demon ancestor and the silver wolf were extremely fast. Once they started fighting, they moved so fast that they could only see their shadows flitting by. Two figures, one black and one white, fought on the ground. Powerful air currents rippled out from between the two, spreading to the surroundings. As for the surging pressure, Mu Chen and Mu Yu, who were standing at the back, did not feel much pressure or discomfort because of the existence of the ancient mythological beasts in their bodies. However, their little faces were a little sore from the airflow. Mu Chen turned around and hugged his sister in his arms. He used his small body to shield her from the turbulence so that she would not be scratched. However, he used his own body to protect his sister. The back of his hand and the part of his face that wasn't covered were scratched by the airflow, and traces of blood seeped out of the wounds. Damn it! Seeing his little brother and sister in danger and even seeing blood, Hao Hao was furious. His cold little face was filled with rage. However, he was tied up by the immortal trapping rope. The more he struggled, the tighter the rope became. Yu lifted her head in his arms and was pressed back down. However, she still saw that her twin brother was injured and bleeding. "Brother, you're bleeding." She was like an enraged little beast, glaring angrily and raising her childish voice. Mu-chin pursed his lips and didn't respond. He only hugged her and pressed her head against his small chest again, not letting her move. Perhaps the silver wolf heard Yu-er's words, for it turned around to take a look. It saw a few scratches on Mu-chen's crescent-white robe, and a few strands of blood seeped out. The bright red blood on that crescent-white robe was particularly glaring, and it caused the anger in its heart to surge. It bared its fangs and pounced forward, biting the mountain demon ancestor's arm. Hiss! Ah! A shrill cry rang out, trembling and filled with fear. The mountain demon ancestor couldn't break free and immediately struck the silver wolf with his palm. However, because of this, the silver wolf, which was already tearing at his arm, bit hard and forcefully tore his arm off. His body couldn't avoid the blow. "Ancestor!" Everyone cried out in alarm. Their eyes were filled with horror. Their voices trembled slightly as they retreated. They stared in disbelief at their ancestor's arm that had been bitten off. The bloody wound and the arm that was in the silver wolf's mouth all made their faces turn pale. The old ancestor of the mountain demon sect covered his wound. Blood seeped out of his old palm. Soon, his pale palm was dyed red. Blood flowed out of his palm and dripped to the ground, seeping into the ground. He staggered back a few steps as cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. His malicious gaze was filled with ferocity and hatred as he stared at the silver wolf. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Chapter 4609. With one of his arms torn off, the mountain demon ancestor's murderous intent surged. His eyes were bloodshot, and a murderous aura shot out from his body. His vicious gaze swept past the silver wolf and landed on Mu-chin, Mu-yu, and the tied-up Hao-er. His face was slightly twisted with anger and hatred, and his entire face became somewhat ferocious. He released the hand that was covering his broken arm and pressed a few acupoints on his shoulder a few times, using his spiritual aura to stop the loss of blood. "Capture those two brats for me." As his sinister voice sounded, the air around him surged, and in the next moment, he attacked the silver wolf. When the people who were originally retreating heard his words, they hesitated for a moment. Seeing that he was entangled with the sacred beast, the Black Mountain sect leader and vice-sect leader looked at each other. Gritting their teeth, they rushed forward and headed towards Mu-chin and Mu-yu. "Run!" Hao-er saw this and immediately shouted, his heart filled with anxiety. When Mu-chin saw the two people rushing towards them, he immediately pulled his sister and ran. However, no matter how fast they were, they could not outrun the leader and vice-leader whose cultivation was higher than theirs. "Brats, you can't escape." The two men chasing from behind flanked them from the front and back, reaching out to grab the two children. Seeing that the two children had shrunk a little and were close to each other, they sneered and were about to lift them up. Unexpectedly, just as their hands were about to grab the children's collars, the two children who had been huddled up suddenly leaped up and attacked them with sharp blades that glinted with cold light. The sharp blades slashed across their arms at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover, and cut open a wound so deep that the bones could be seen. Hiss! The two people sucked in a breath of cold air and retreated in shock. At the same time, they covered the wound with one hand and stared at the two 4-year-old children in disbelief. At this time, the two of them were like two small beasts on guard, as if their fur was standing on guard. Their delicate little faces were filled with anger and fierceness. Their small bodies were slightly bent, and their hands were holding daggers dripping with blood, ready to fight at any time. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they could not help but be startled. There was surprise and astonishment in their eyes. These two small children were actually able to injure the two leaders of the Black Mountain clan. Indeed, they were not simple. This kind of temperament, this kind of tenacity, even if they were adults, they might not be able to do it, and they were only 4-year-old children. At this moment, many people thought in their hearts, they are indeed the children of the ghost Dr. Fingzhou. However, everyone knew that they could take advantage of the fact that the two sect leaders of the Black Mountain sect had underestimated their opponents and attacked them. However, they would not be able to withstand the attacks of the two sect leaders. After all, this attack was just taking advantage of their unpreparedness. Sure enough, their faces, and the corners of their lips, and they sneered, "Good, very well. I'd like to see if you'll still bare your claws and fangs like a little beast later." As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them once again charged towards the two children. Chapter 46:10. The Silver Wolf was fighting against the mountain devil that had lost an arm. When it heard the commotion behind it, it turned around and its eyes lit up with anger. It let out a roar, but just at this moment, the mountain devil that was retreating had a strange light flash in its eyes. It turned its hand and threw something out. At the same time, it let out a loud roar. Mystic gold steel shield. Trap. When Hao saw the mountain demon throw out an item, his eyes narrowed and he shouted, "Be careful." The Silver Wolf turned around and saw something glowing with a golden light coming down on it. It didn't see what it was, but just as it was about to leap away to avoid it, the thing seemed to have suddenly become heavier and fell from above at an extremely fast speed. Bang! A heavy sound was heard. The powerful vibration caused a circle of dust to rise from the ground. When the dust dissipated, the Silver Wolf was trapped in a huge steel shield shaped like a golden bell. Unlike the golden bell, this huge golden steel cage was not sealed and could not be seen inside. Instead, it was like a cage, surrounded by golden steel black iron. The Silver Wolf was trapped inside. It tried to break it open, but after several attempts, it could not move it at all. Ha 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 ha. The mountain demon raised his head and laughed loudly. His laughter was filled with excitement, bloodthirst, and savagery. His laughter carried pressure as it spread in the air. The vibration spread like water ripples and lingered in the air for a long time. Suddenly, he stopped laughing. His ferocious face was filled with bloodthirst as he stared at the Silver Wolf. His voice was filled with hostility and anger as he said, "You tore off one of my arms, so I'll chop off both of your master's arms. I'll make them suffer so much that they can neither live nor die. To vent the anger in my heart. If you dare to touch them, I'll definitely exterminate your entire family and make you die without a burial ground." The Silver Wolf's voice came from the mystic gold steel shield. The threat and killing intent in his voice were very obvious. "Is that so? I'd like to see what you can do to me." His voice was sinister. Just as he was about to step forward, he suddenly heard a commotion around him. A woo! Woo! Woo woo! Suddenly, wolf howls came from the surroundings. The sound came from afar and came closer. It sounded like there were quite a few of them. Why are there wolf howls? Why are there wolves here? There seems to be quite a few of them. The surrounding people exclaimed in a low voice and looked at each other with surprise on their faces. Someone immediately rose into the air and looked around from a high place. His face could not help but change when he looked. Oh no! A large pack of wolves rushed over. There are at least 200 to 300 of them. The cultivator in the air cried out in alarm. He came down from the air and anxiously said, "Those wolves came from the forest behind the sect. It's not an ordinary wolf, but a wind wolf." "What? What should we do?" Some of the weaker people were anxious. The wind wolves were extremely fast and ferocious. In addition, there were many of them. If they were to fight, they could not guarantee that they would be able to leave this place alive. Hearing their words, the mountain demon patriarch narrowed his eyes and stared at the trapped silver wolf. "You summoned it." "Pfft." The silver wolf snorted and glanced at him without saying a word. Chapter 46:11. The silver wolf glared at him and roared, "Don't you dare touch them." "Ha ha ha. Why wouldn't I dare? Just because they're Fingzhou's children." The ancestor sneered and looked at him. "Where's Fingzhou? Where is she? Why don't I see her? Even if I kill her children, what can she do?" Hao-Er, who was inside the barrier, clenched his fists. His heart was burning with rage. He wanted to rush up and kill that person, but he wasn't as strong as that person. He couldn't even fight against a Zun cultivator from the sect. When he saw the two people bringing the bound Mu Qin and Mu Yu forward, Hao-Er took a deep breath and shouted, "Wait." Hao-Er's cold little face was tense. He looked at the mountain demon ancestor and said, "I'll let the silver wolf retreat. The silver wolf and I will go with you. Release my siblings and our guards." The ancestor narrowed his eyes at him and didn't say anything. "Don't you want my contracted beast? The silver wolf is a sacred beast. As long as you let my siblings and guards go, I can break the contract and let you form a new one with it." Hao-Er looked at him and added, "You should know that sacred beasts aren't easy to find. If I don't break the contract, you won't be able to tame the silver wolf and form a contract with it." When he said this, the silver wolf looked at him. Hao-Er only looked at it and didn't say anything. However, he used his divine sense to tell the ancestor that this was just a plan. He hoped to protect Mu Qin and Mu Yu. As long as they left safely, they would think of a way to deal with them. When the silver wolf heard this, it only glanced at the magic treasure that trapped it. It knew that this thing had trapped it. There was no other way, so it could only do this. The mountain demon patriarch glanced at the two children, and his lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile. "Let them go? Ha, don't you know that there's a saying for letting the tiger return to the mountain? These two brats are only about 4 years old, yet they were able to injure the two sect masters of our Black Mountain sect. If we let them leave alive, wouldn't we be planting a seed of disaster for our Black Mountain sect?" He stared darkly at Hao-Er and said, "You have to break the contract with this silver wolf even if you don't want to. Otherwise, I'll first break the arms and legs of these two brats in front of you, then chop off their limbs and feed them to the wolves. As for their bodies, haha." The strange voice was filled with bloodlust and savagery. He stretched out his hand and lifted Mu Yu, who had been brought to the front by the two sect masters. He moved closer to smell the scent on her body and said, "She even has an innate spiritual body. If we use her to make medicinal wine, it will definitely be a great tonic." "You dare?" Hao-Er's eyes were red with anger. He struggled and wanted to pounce forward, but he was firmly held down. In addition, he was tied up by the immortal binding rope and the boundary in front of him. He couldn't get past them at all. "If you dare to eat me, my father and mother won't let you off." Yu-Er's childish voice was filled with anger. She glared at him with her beautiful eyes. Her small body was lifted into the air and she couldn't kick him. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and spat on his face. "You're courting death." Chapter 46:12. You, Younger sister. Miss you. How, Mu-chin as well as 17 cried out in alarm. They wanted to rush forward, but they were firmly pressed down on the ground. They could only look on helplessly as that ancestor of Mountain Devil clan grabbed Yu's lapel and lifted her up high, then ferociously threw her to the ground. That scene made their heart tighten, and despair appeared in their eyes. Younger sister. How, and Mu-chen's desperate voice carried a trace of weeping. They struggled and shouted, and their voice carried a trace of pleading, Don't kill her. Don't. Was lifted up high above the head of that ancestor of Mountain Devil, then ferociously thrown down again. Before she could react, she only heard the heart-wrenching and lung-splitting screams of her elder brother and brother. Because the speed of that old ancestor of Demon Mountain was extremely fast, and his strength was extremely heavy, as if he wanted to kill her, so at that instant when she was thrown to the ground, Her felt chilly air streaking across her face, and as if the world was spinning in front of her eyes, she instinctively closed her eyes and cried out in alarm. Ah! Looking at this scene, the hearts of the surrounding people rose, as if their breath was stuck in their throat, and their heart also seemed to have stopped beating. They somewhat disbelievingly looked at this scene. In their view, that was merely a little doll who didn't understand anything, but that ancestor of Mountain Devil clan actually had the heart to do this, and actually wanted to forcibly throw her to her death. Thinking about that ancestor of Mountain Devil clan, that little girl also fell to the ground. If her head fell to the ground first, then her brain would certainly splatter in all directions. Thinking about that bloody and cruel scene, many people couldn't bear to look and closed their eyes, or slightly shifted their line of sight to the other side, and couldn't help but silently sigh in their heart. They felt pity for that little girl, and also felt that it was a pity for her to die like this, and even more felt that this kind of miserable death was too cruel. But no one dared to stand out, and even more so, no one dared to save that little girl from the hands of ancestor of Mountain Devil clan. But, just when everyone thought that little girl was dead for sure, a ghost-like figure however came out from that barrier, and with an extremely fast speed, that figure caught who was falling to the ground. This sudden change caused the surrounding air to stagnate, and the air instantly became silent. Only the rustling of the surrounding leaves and the howling of the wolves could be heard from afar. After Mu-chin, 17 and Silver Wolf saw that someone had caught they couldn't help but sigh in relief. Originally, they were worried about They looked at the person who had saved and carefully sized him up. Who was this person? How could he dare to save in this kind of situation? Moreover, from the looks of it, they didn't recognize him. This person was wearing a black robe and didn't look like someone from this sect. Moreover, he was wearing a mask. Little girl, are you scared? That man's deep and muffled voice resounded, and it was very sweet-sounding. His voice was like a spring breeze, making people involuntarily relax. Hearing that voice and feeling that she was being hugged by someone, slowly opened her eyes, and what entered her eyes was that pair of deep black eyes with a smiling expression. As for what he looked like, didn't see it. Chapter 46:13. Blinked her beautiful big eyes, and her exquisite little face was somewhat foolishly looking at him, as if she didn't expect that someone would suddenly appear to save her. She looked at this person who was wearing a ghost mask, and her immature voice was filled with curiosity as she softly asked, "Who are you?" "I'm your savior." The corner of the man's mouth slightly curled, and his mood seemed to be very happy. His hands that were originally hugging her turned, changing her posture. The rope that was originally tying her was untied and fell to the ground. Then, he hugged her with one hand. With regards to this person who suddenly appeared, everyone was shocked. The most shocked person should be the great elder who had received this person. His eyes widened in astonishment, and there was alarm in his eyes as he exclaimed in a low voice, This person is that traveling cultivator who is staying in the guest courtyard. Hearing this, the people of the sect pursed their lips, and their expression became grave. Among them, one of the venerables said, Just now, he passed through the barrier. He came out from here. He actually easily passed through our barrier. Moreover, he was actually able to catch that little girl who was thrown to the ground by Mountain Devil ancestor from such a far distance. This speed. Another person said, and his complexion became somewhat pale. I can't see his cultivation base, ah. Another elder muttered, somewhat absent-minded. Compared to other people, Mountain Devil's complexion was unsightly. He was filled with killing intent, but he couldn't find a way to vent it, and this unknown person had appeared. Immediately, he condensed palm wind and attacked that person. However, when that palm wind that could be seen with naked eyes attacked towards that man wearing ghost mask and that man wearing ghost mask didn't even dodge. He only moved his gaze away from his exquisite and lovable pink and tender little face, then raised his hand and flicked his sleeve, directly dispelling that airflow. At the same time, that Mountain Devil was thrown several meters away. Bang! The powerful airflow attacked, and that Mountain Devil only felt that airflow was like a wave rolling back, and with a bang, it landed on his chest, causing the chi and blood in his body to instantly soar up, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Pfff. His feet were unsteady, and his body also lost balance. At that moment, his entire body was thrown to the ground. Ancestor! Everyone cried out in alarm, and promptly went forward to help him up. Stop! If you don't stop, I'll kill him. The leader of the Black Mountain sect, who was holding Mu Qin down, shouted loudly, using Mu Qin to threaten the man in the ghost mask. Brother! Yu became anxious, and her little face was filled with worry. Her little hands also grabbed the clothes of this ghost-masked man, and with her soft and sweet voice, she anxiously shouted, my big brother, I want my big brother. Be good, don't worry. The man patted her head and coaxed her clumsily. He raised his eyes, and when he looked at that Black Mountain sect master, his deep gaze became chilly, and his voice was also 3 times harsher than when he was talking to you. Release him, and I'll leave your corpse intact. His indifferent words seemed so casual, but it made the Black Mountain clan leader's heart tighten. His eyes were filled with fear, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead due to his nervousness. The hand around Mu Chen's neck also trembled slightly because of his words. Chapter 46:14. Who do you want to kill? Wearing a ghost mask, the man carrying you with one hand came to the back of the Black Mountain sect master. His cold and indifferent voice was like that of an Azura from hell, faintly entering the latter's ears. That Black Mountain sect master's body stiffened. He didn't even dare to move, or it could be said that he couldn't even move. That man suddenly came to his back. Just by placing his hand on his shoulder, he felt an aura of death. That terrifying aura shrouded his whole body. Even if he wanted to escape, he couldn't. Originally, he was carrying Mu Qin with one hand and clasping his neck with the other. Under the pressure of that man's hand on his shoulder, he couldn't help but slowly put him down. The hand clasping his neck also moved away uncontrollably. After Mu Qin was put down on the ground, he quickly came to the side of the ghost-masked man. Looking up at his sister, he quickly asked, Sister, how are you? Are you hurt? No, brother, I'm fine. Her quickly said. She wanted to get down, but this man held her tightly. If he didn't let go, she also couldn't get down. Gotcha. Ah. The two little guys who were talking suddenly heard a gotcha sound. They quickly turned around and saw that the ghost-masked man lightly patted the Black Mountain Sect Master's shoulder. That Black Mountain Sect Master's whole body seemed to have broken into pieces. His whole body curled up into a ball and fell to the ground. A mournful scream came out from his mouth. Blood overflowed from his mouth. His eyes were wide open and his body twitched until he couldn't breathe. Yu-er looked at him in a daze. She saw that the man turned his face and looked at her. He asked, "Are you scared?" Seeing this, Yu-er shook her head. Looking at him, she said, "No, I'm very brave." Hearing this, the man smiled. "Very good. Put me down." Yu-er took the opportunity to say. Looking at that mountain demon, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Otherwise, what if I can't beat that child-eating demon?" Hee hee. The man chuckled softly, still hugging her with one hand, and said, "To deal with him, one hand is enough." With a wave of his hand, he untied the rope on Mu Chen's body. Turning slightly to the side, he glanced at the trapped silver wolf and curled his lips, revealing an inexplicable smile. Carrying Yu-er, he slowly walked over. Seeing this, Mu Chen hurriedly followed behind and walked towards the trapped silver wolf. The silver wolf stared at the man. No one knew what he was thinking, but there was still some wariness in his eyes. Silver wolf is a super god beast, so powerful, how can this cage trap it? Yu-er confusedly asked while looking at that golden bell-shaped cage. This is a rare treasure. Not to mention sacred beasts, it can even trap ancient divine beasts. As the masked man spoke, he raised his hand and placed it on the Xian gold steel shield. He gently turned his palm and a clang sound was heard, accompanied by a gust of air. Pooh! That mountain demon who was being supported by someone had his blood contract with that treasure erased. His chi and blood rebounded, and his spiritual power eroded. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his heart. This made his originally pale face even paler. Spurting out blood from his heart also aggravated his injury. He only felt a burst of darkness in front of him, but he forced himself to hold on. Yu-er curiously looked at him. She saw him turn his hand, and that thing was caught in his palm, turning into a small golden bell cage. Chapter 46:15. Yu-er looked at the little thing in her palm, and a trace of craftiness flashed through her beautiful eyes. She looked at him and said, "My mother said that I can't casually take other people's things. Besides, I also don't know who you are, so I can't take your things." Hearing her words, the corners of the man's mouth rose slightly, revealing a shallow arc. "You will know who I am in the future. For now, don't worry." Seeing that she didn't get anything out of him, Yu-er's crafty gaze turned and landed on her elder brother and 17 who were caught by the people from the sect. She said, "My elder brother and 17 are still in their hands." After saying that, he raised his hand and condensed spiritual power in his palm, striking the barrier. With just one palm, a loud bang resounded from the barrier, and the spiritual power dispersed in all directions. "Still not going to save your master?" The man glanced at the silver wolf beside him and said unhurriedly. The silver wolf glanced at him, and in the next moment, it pounced toward the people from the sect. Seeing this scene, the people from the sect were already scared silly. How could they still have the mind to catch Heartwarming and 17? Moreover, they saw with their own eyes that the Black Mountain Sect's master was turned into a 3-inch nail by that mysterious masked man's palm. They didn't want to end up like that. Therefore, when they saw the silver wolf pouncing toward them after the barrier was broken, the people from the sect were so scared that their faces turned pale. They cried out in alarm, "Quick! Run!" At this moment, they no longer cared about their own image. They all took to their heels and ran. Some ran so fast that they fell on the ground and desperately tried to get as far away as possible. "Humph! None of you can escape." The silver wolf coldly snorted. It first came to 17's side and used its claws to cut the ropes on his body. Then it said, "Go and untie that immortal binding rope." At the same time, it raised its head and howled. "Awoo!" The wolf's howl reverberated in the air and spread to the distance. After those wind wolves heard the howl, they swept past like the wind and arrived in the surroundings. They pounced on those people and bit with all their strength. With the addition of the several hundred wind wolves, the scene became very chaotic. The people of the Black Mountain sect also recovered from their shock. They did not care about their sect master's corpse and immediately cried out in alarm, "Quickly run!" Seeing those people wanted to escape with that old ancestor of Demon Mountain, Yu-Er glared and angrily said, "Don't let that child-eating devil go. The people of their sect cannot leave this place alive." She was a vengeful person. These people wanted to kill them and eat them. She was no match for them. Otherwise, she would have killed them herself. Hearing Yu-Er, Ghost-Masked Man smiled, and said with good temper, "Okay, then let them all stay." As soon as his voice fell, a powerful pressure was emitted from his body. As the pressure spread out, those who were about to run were pressed to the ground by the strong pressure. They were all lying on the ground, unable to move. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on them. Even breathing was difficult. Yu-Er looked at this scene in amazement, and again looked at him. Her pair of beautiful eyes blinked, no one knew what she was thinking. Chapter 46:16. Who the hell are you? The complexion of Mountain Demon who was lying on the ground was pale. He knew that he couldn't escape, so he didn't struggle. He only stared at the man who was wearing a ghost mask while gasping for breath. "A person who can kill you." His deep and low voice slowly came out. While speaking, he slightly tilted his head and looked at Yu, who was in his arms. He asked, "Little girl, how do you want him to die?" Yu-Er blinked her eyes, then slightly tilting her little head, she seriously thought for a bit. Finally, her soft and gentle voice came out, "Since he wanted to eat us earlier, then let people pull out his teeth, then cut off his tendons and meridians, cripple his cultivation, then throw him to wolves to eat." Hearing this, the surrounding people couldn't help but shiver. Their gaze carried fear and astonishment as they looked at the little girl who looked like carved jade. It seemed that they didn't expect to hear this kind of words from her mouth. "Okay," the masked man replied. He raised his hand and crippled Mountain Demon's cultivation. Mountain Demon screamed miserably. He looked at a Black Mountain sect disciple and said, "You come here. Pull out his teeth and break his tendons. Then throw him to the wolves." I don't dare." That disciple's legs went soft and he knelt down. His complexion was pale and his body was trembling. He looked at the surrounding people who were fighting with the wolves. He looked at the wolves pouncing on the people of the sect and tearing them apart. He was so scared that he couldn't even straighten his legs. With this masked man and several children as the center, the wolves didn't come close. Because of this, he was still alive and kneeling here. "If you do it, you can live. If you don't do it, you will die very miserably," the masked man leisurely said. When that Black Mountain sect disciple who was originally trembling heard this, he suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with uncertainty. He asked in a trembling voice, "If I do it, I can live. And I won't kill you." The masked man replied. Okay, I will do it. I will do it. Seeing that he was going to die without a doubt, that person's eyes lit up. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. He clenched his teeth and walked forward. Seeing that the old ancestor's cultivation was crippled, he couldn't help but tremble. He said, "Old ancestor, don't blame me. This disciple was also forced." After speaking, he didn't dare to look at the old ancestor's eyes. He immediately used one hand to pinch the old ancestor's face to make him open his mouth. At the same time, his other hand, he used the old ancestor's teeth. A mountain demon's ancestor's face. That disciple then severed the tendons in his arms and legs. At this moment, Mountain Demon couldn't even scream. He lay there on the verge of death until that disciple lifted him up and threw him into the pack of wolves. Some people in the surroundings stared at that disciple, feeling that he was too cruel. No matter what, that person was still an ancestor of the Black Mountain sect. How could he do that? But they also knew that if they were in his shoes, maybe they would have made the same choice as that disciple. Chapter 46:17. Get lost. The masked man said, but he didn't kill him. Instead, he carried her with one hand and looked at those practitioners who were fighting with the wolf pack. How and 17 came to the masked man's side. How looked at this person and stretched out his hands, saying, "Return my sister to me. It's not safe." The man glanced at him and said, "Still carrying her with one hand." He didn't intend to hand her over to him. Seeing this, Hao and Mu Qin pursed their lips and looked at each other. Seeing that he didn't do anything else, they didn't say anything else. They just followed closely beside him and watched as the Silver Wolf led the hundreds of Wind Wolves to kill the people from the other sects and Black Mountain sect. At the same time, no one knew that at a place some distance away, Murong Yixian was heading in the direction of this sect. On the way, he heard that there was a large-scale battle going on above the sect. Moreover, it was the Black Mountain sect's ancestor whose notoriety spread far and wide in this area. When he heard that they were charging towards the three children, he immediately raised his chi and soared into the sky, flying on his flying sword. After meeting Fengzhou and Xianyuan Mose that day, he found out that their three children had met with an accident and their whereabouts were unknown. When he was traveling, he paid more attention and inquired about the three children while he was at it. Not long ago, when he came to this area, he heard that three children came to this sect. There were even rumors that the three children were Ghost Dr. Fengzhou's children. At that moment, he didn't care whether the news was true or false and immediately headed towards this sect. Flying on his flying sword, the closer he got to that sect, the more he felt the fluctuation of the airflow in the sky above. Faintly, there was also the aura of a sacred beast. Looks like those three children are really here, he muttered. When he felt that the airflow wasn't in front of the sect's main mountain gate, but at the foot of the back mountain, he turned and headed there. When he arrived at the sky above the back mountain, he stood on the sword and saw the chaotic scene below. Amidst the chaos, the three children were exceptionally dazzling, and one could almost notice their existence at a glance. These were Fengzhou and Xianyuan Mose's three children. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. Just as he was about to go down, he saw the masked man holding the little girl look in his direction. With just a glance, he couldn't help but frown, and his eyes flashed with deep thought. Who was this person? When he probed with his divine sense to find out his cultivation level, he didn't expect that he wouldn't find anything. Below, the masked man glanced at the person above and then looked away indifferently, as if he didn't care about the other party at all. Hao and Mu Qin, who had been paying attention to him, followed the masked man's gaze and also noticed the man in white standing on the flying sword in the sky. However, Muchen did not recognize him. Instead, Hao Er's eyes flashed when he saw Murong Yixuan. Obviously, he recognized him. Murong Yixuan descended from above and landed in front of the masked man. After he glanced at the three children, his gaze fell on Hao Er as he asked gently, "Do you still remember me?" Hao Er paused for a moment and nodded. Seeing this, Murong Yixuan smiled and said, "Your parents have been looking for you. How are you? Are you alright?" You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.